let's just dive right in. AI is literally everywhere now, right? It's in our phones, it's in our cars. But as it gets smarter and smarter, we've got to ask a really important question. How do we make sure this stuff is actually working for us and not, against us? It's not just about being smart, it's about being safe and fair. And that, right there, is the heart of what we're talking about today. Responsible AI.
So, to make this real, let's picture something you've probably thought about, a self-driving car. You hop in, you tell it where to go, and you're trusting it completely. But what happens when things get tricky? What about those split-second decisions in an emergency? And maybe even more importantly, if it makes a mistake, do we have any way of knowing why it made that choice?
All right, to really tackle those big questions, we need a roadmap, and that's exactly what we have. First, we'll define what responsible AI even means. Then we'll dig into the four big pillars: fairness and bias, explainability and transparency, control and reliability, and one you might not have thought of: AI's environmental footprint. Think of these as the essential ingredients for building AI we can actually trust.
Okay, first up, what is responsible AI? And I gotta say, it's way more than just a buzzword you hear thrown around. It really signals a huge shift in thinking. We're moving past the question of, can we build this, to the much more important question, okay, should we build this? And if we do, how do we do it right?
So, at its core, you can think of responsible AI as the blueprint for building trust. It's basically a promise, a commitment, that the algorithms we're creating aren't just powerful, but that they're also ethical, they're transparent, and they're accountable to us, the people they're supposed to be serving. All right, let's jump into our first pillar, and honestly, it's a huge one: fairness. I mean, you could make a pretty strong case that an AI that isn't fair, well, it isn't really all that intelligent, is it? So what this really boils down to is this: an AI's decisions have to be equitable. It shouldn't matter what your age, your race, or your background is. To go back to our car example, it absolutely has to treat every single pedestrian it sees with the exact same level of caution. No exceptions.
But that leads to the million-dollar question, right? How in the world do you teach a machine to be fair? I mean, an AI doesn't have its own moral compass. It only knows what we teach it. And the key to all of this, as you've probably guessed, is the data we feed it. For a self-driving car's AI to be fair, it has to be trained on an absolutely massive and diverse set of data. Just think about how catastrophic it would be if the car was only trained to spot certain kinds of pedestrians. It would be a total failure. So that training data has to cover the whole shebang. People of all types, cyclists, different driving styles from super cautious to, well, let's just say assertive. All right, so we get it. Fair data is non-negotiable. But here's the thing. Even a perfectly fair AI isn't much good to us if its decisions are a total mystery. That brings us right to our second pillar. We have to open up that infamous black box using two key ideas: explainability and transparency. This is a perfect example of explainability in action. See, a system that isn't explainable just gives you a no. That's it. But an explainable one says no, and here is exactly why. That single difference is absolutely massive for building trust, checking for fairness, and even catching mistakes. And this slide does a great job of breaking down the difference. Think of it like this: explainability tells you what happened in one specific case. Transparency, on the other hand, tells you how and why the whole system works the way it does. You can't have real accountability without both. So to get that true transparency, you really have to peel back the curtain on three different layers. You need to know the algorithm, the actual method it's using. You need to know what data it was trained on. And you need to know the rules or the decision criteria it's following. If any one of those is a mystery, then true accountability is pretty much off the table. And all of that flows perfectly into our third pillar: control and reliability. Because look, it's one thing to understand why an AI made a decision. It's another thing entirely to make sure it behaves predictably, and this is key, we humans are always in the driver's seat. This really comes down to three key things. First up is robustness. Can the system handle curveballs, like a sudden downpour or a weird sensor reading? Second is veracity. Is it making decisions based on good, up-to-the-second information, not old data? And finally, the big one: controllability. Can a human step in and take over at any moment? The answer to all three of those has to be a resounding yes.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit for our fourth pillar, because this is one that I think gets overlooked a lot: the environmental footprint of AI. A truly responsible AI can't just ignore its impact on the planet. There's a very real, physical cost to all of this incredible digital intelligence. And just get a load of this number. Some estimates say that data centers, which are really the engines powering a lot of AI, could be using up to 2.5% of the world's entire electricity supply. That's more than what many entire countries use. It's it's a huge footprint. So if we're serious about being responsible, we have to focus on sustainability. And that means a whole bunch of things, like powering data centers with renewable energy for one. But it's also about designing smarter, more efficient algorithms, and even creating specialized hardware, custom chips built specifically for AI tasks that use way less power. It's all about reducing that carbon footprint without losing performance. So, we've gone through fairness, transparency, control, even the environmental side of things. After all that, what's the big takeaway here? What's the one thing you should really remember? I think the most important thing to get is this. Responsible AI isn't just a feature you tack on at the end. It's not a checkbox. It has to be part of the foundation. It has to be woven into the very fabric of these systems from the absolute beginning. And that really leaves us with one final big question to chew on. As this technology keeps evolving at this mind-blowing speed, our biggest challenge isn't just about making AI more powerful. It's about making sure that for every step forward in power, we take an equal step forward in responsibility.